so what we're aiming to do today is give you some very practical tools and practical exercises that you can use to make significant change and reset your mindset over, say, a 14-day period. So I've done thousands of hours of work with clients over the past few years. And what we're going to go through today is very much the go-to exercises and techniques that I would give people to make significant mindset change.
Nice. Okay, sounds good. Let's get onto it. First things first, why do we need to reset the mindset again?
Well, resetting the mindset, it's incredibly important. It comes down to a little bit, I guess, of what we were talking about last week. Okay. And
Mm,
I'll just sort of reflect a bit on what we were talking about there. For those of you that weren't with us last week, firstly, welcome. But there was a concept we spoke about, which was the map, which is reality,
mhm.
versus the territory, which is what our mind makes of reality. Now, essentially, I'll keep this reasonably brief. In any given moment, there are about 2 million bits of information that the brain can contend with. But the brain can't manage 2 million bits of information in any particular moment. It can manage about 5 to 7% of that. So, how it manages is what we do is we delete, we distort, and we generalize information, okay, to create this map of the world around us. Problem is there, the map is something that's almost synthetic. It's almost like that reality is somewhat flexible. We've created this particular map by which we're looking at the world, and it's not always right. And that creates your mindset. And so this is the importance of every once in a while doing some work and actually resetting your mindset. And you can be surprised what you can find in there that's just not doing you any good.
That's right. For those who are thinking that nothing wrong with me. Okay, fair enough. You probably don't need this then, right? But if for those people who goes, you know what, I can do better, right? I can probably not only do better, but I can also get rid of other things that doesn't work out anymore for me, then this video is for you.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And that's the thing. When people go to see therapists, well, people have got this mistaken perception that to go and see a therapist or a mindset coach or whatever, that there needs to be something really wrong with you. And it's simply not the case. You can simply want to do better and acknowledge that you're not perfect.
Yeah, that's
And
right.
as we progress, we come up with ideas that negatively affect our mindset. And you just need to occasionally clear them out.
Yeah. Imagine just cleaning your house, getting rid of old furniture, getting rid of instruments, tools that you no longer use or are broken, yeah, for that matter.
Yeah.
Just imagine clearing that and then going to the shops and buying the best tools, the best furniture, fresh, brand new, modern. It's not 80 years old that is almost working. No, this is brand new and working. So that's what I guess the reset that we're talking about here in this video.
That's exactly it. That's exactly right.
Yeah. Now let's get started. Let's the first thing you need to do is identifying the sticking point. Jono, what does that mean?
Exactly. So it starts off with just simply reflecting on the areas of stagnation. It's very, very rare that someone is stuck in every aspect of their life, even though they might feel like that. Typically, it's going to be one or two areas of their life that they're a little bit stuck on. And that just becomes a little bit pervasive and spreads throughout, that
Mm,
perception spreads throughout their life. So it's about taking a little bit of a step back, whether it's relationships, whether it's career, whether it's personal growth, or just small elements within any of those, and actually get a real understanding for where you're stuck. Okay.
mm.
And typically that ends up being less places than you actually feel like it is.
Man, I wish a lot of people can hear us right now, what you said, hey, because it's like you said, it's very pervasive. When people when they feel stuck, they freeze. And a lot of people, when they freeze, they don't know what to do. They get overwhelmed. And then they go down these almost self-destructive behaviors now that I'm stuck. So what's the point? I give up, right? So I hope a lot of people can hear what you said there because yes, you're probably stuck in one point, but you're not stuck everywhere, right? So that's pretty good, man. Okay, the first part of that one is reflect on the areas of stagnation. What does that mean, Jono?
It's just simply identifying those specific aspects where you are stuck, as opposed to just assuming you're stuck everywhere. And that very quickly leads you into just acknowledging what the daily impact of that actually is. You know, you can also be stuck in a particular aspect of your life and just be feeling a bit down because you're stuck. But is it actually having any massive impact on you on a daily basis? This is
Mm,
the question. Quite often, people have got an area where they're stuck, and sure, it's a bit frustrating, but is it actually causing them a major problem in an area of their life? Maybe yes, maybe no. So it's important to understand whether it is or not.
mm. So does that actually affect, for example, if I'm stuck in my relationship with my cousin, yeah,
Mm.
that that shouldn't be impacting, or that should not have any impact on my career, right?
Exactly right. Exactly
Yeah,
right. That's yeah, exactly right. It's about compartmentalizing things correctly and just trying to see things for what they are.
yeah. Now, in case, by the way, the audience who's watching this, I got my notes here in case you're wondering why I'm looking this way. The second point of identifying the sticking point is acknowledge the daily impact. That's now from the next point of what we were just discussing, right?
Yeah, that's just what we were just saying. That's acknowledging that daily impact. And, you know, if you are a bit stuck on something, is it or is it not actually
Mm,
impact you in any significant way? Pretty simple.
yeah. The next point on the identifying the sticking point, the next point on the identifying the sticking point is examining the internal narratives. Okay, guys, I've been I've been marketing now for 20 years plus, right? I've worked with a lot of business people in the marketing world, right? And that in the internal narrative is actually one of the things that we discuss or think about in marketing a lot. Because when you read an ad copy, right, or copy or ad content, we want that ad copy to talk inside you, right? And we know that in the industry, by the way. In case you're wondering, is that really true? You know, do I really talk to myself? Am I hearing things? I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example. When you hear a Michael Jackson song or something like that, right? Do you find yourself repeating that in your head, right? Or a song that you heard or you like, and then you're walking down the road or going to your work and you hearing it in your head, right? That's an example of like a really not visible, but a really a very present evidence that there is an internal conversation or an internal narrative in your mind. So that's your evidence. Jono, can you give us examples? What are these internal narratives like?
Oh, absolutely. Internal narratives are incredibly important, and pretty much everybody runs some sort of an internal narrative. There are people that sort of tell themselves they don't. Pretty much everybody does. Not there are a small percentage of people that don't so much, but pretty much everyone runs an internal narrative, an internal dialogue, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Um, and it's an incredibly important thing to be able to get control of. If you're dealing with people with who are dealing with procrastination, anxiety, things like that, they tend to have a very negative internal narrative, like, oh, I'm no good at that. I can't do that. Okay.
Hmm.
I've never been good at that. I'm good at this, but I'm really no good at this. Okay, that person's good at that, but I'm not good at that. All these sorts of things are sort of limiting beliefs within that internal narrative. And in relation to sort of what we're doing with this exercise here, it comes down to if you find something you're stuck with, how are you telling yourself that you're stuck? You know,
Yes.
what's either your excuse that you're giving
Mm.
yourself, which is very possible. Um, what is the rationalization? You know, how are you telling yourself you're stuck? But yeah, of course I'm stuck. Something like that. You know, that's beyond my capabilities. And how are you arriving at that?
Yeah. And also, how do you know that you are?
Very, very simple. How do you actually know that you are stuck? You know, what are you, is it just how you feel, or are you actually checking for some external evidence there?
That's it. That's it. That's it. And this is what we're doing here. Another way to identify the sticking point is, well, not identifying, is what are you going to do about that is perhaps writing it down. I love writing everything down because I'll give you an example how I write things down. I've got a notebook or a pad, and I'll write everything that I can think of, right? In a jumbled way or whatever. And there'll be a lot of deleting, a lot of scratching, wrong spelling, and all that stuff. And then the next page, I'm gonna rewrite that, this time without any mistakes. Yeah. So I used to do that. And I've noticed by the second time I wrote it down, I started deleting the crap. I started deleting oh,
Yeah,
that shouldn't be there. Oh, that shouldn't be there. That shouldn't be there. And sometimes the original things that I wrote, I did not write it on the second page and did not even finish it because it's gone, right? I have organized
Hmm.
my thoughts. Yeah. So by the time the third part of that one is after I wrote it in a draft paper, then organize that, make sure there's no more, and this is important, there's no more mistakes on the second part, right? And that's me
Right.
now organizing my mind. And then the third part of that one is me reading it out loudly. And if I sound insane, I
Makes a lot
go,
of sense.
yeah, if I sound insane, that means my rational thought, me organizing this, or even that idea that I was brewing on, well, even from my point of view, I sound insane. It's like, come on, Chrome. That's crazy shit. You know?
Yeah.
So writing it
What,
down,
what,
that's that.
what,
So go ahead.
yeah. What I like about that is the way you went through that, there's a process.
Mm,
Okay. And so much of getting things right and even managing your mindset is about having a process to do so. But specifically with regards writing things down, it's incredibly important because it turns out one of the things I often get people to do is to journal, but journal in a very specific kind of a way. But um, the reason journaling is so effective, it turns out there was always this opinion that, oh, journaling's for 12, 13-year-old girls. That's something they do. Um, turns turns out they were right all the time. They were right
Oh,
all along.
really? Mm,
Absolutely, they were, because, and this is why I get people to journal. That simple act, one of the important things in changing mindset is getting yourself out of the emotional brain over here, which is where people get in trouble,
mm,
and engaging the more logical side of things. Okay.
mm.
Now, that simple act of getting a pen and a piece of paper and writing your thoughts down.
What's the first step? What does reframing mean?
Well, it's about approaching things in a different way.
Yeah.
Okay. I often talk to people about, um, reframing where they're at. People are making progress with something. Quite often, people will come in and see me after a few weeks, And if they're not quite through this reset of where they're at yet, they'll come in and say, "Oh, well, I was doing well, but then this and this happened."
Mm.
And I'll reframe that with them and say, "Well, hang on a second. So it's been 7 days since I last saw you. Okay. You've had 5.5 great days and had a day and a half that wasn't great.
Mm.
Okay. And that's reframing away from focusing on the things that went wrong and focusing on the wins. Okay.
Mm.
And it's essentially the same thing with the language here as well.
Yeah. And guys, if you haven't seen the previous video that we did, where we talked about why and how language helps us. So the give you a just to give you a heads up, the way the unconscious mind thinks in visuals, right? And potentials and what ifs. So it's a bit murky. And also it contains all the memories that we have. And because it has that, it's not really rational. The unconscious mind is, to be honest, abstract, right? The conscious mind is the rational one. That's the one that can put words into a picture. And that's why words matter. I I I'm just gonna go a bit of segue here. I hear people, especially at the pub, which is nothing wrong with this, by the way, people that speak and there's an F word in every 2 or 3 words, there's an F word there or shit or something like that, right? When they even describe their food, oh, I love eating that shit. I'm thinking, what, you like eating shit? You know, like so part of that is why is that important? Because that's how they think. Before it comes out of your mouth, it got processed in your mind. If that's your language coming out, yeah, if it helps you be social with your mates, right? Sweet. However, if you actually think that way and speak that way all the time, that means it's now a pattern, it's now a behavior. And
Yeah.
to reframe your language, that's actually helping your mind do a reframe as well. So the first part of this is identifying your limiting phrases. What does that mean, Jono?
Yeah, so this is being aware of when you're running sort of disempowering language in your internal narrative. Things like I can't, I'm stuck, this always happens, I
Mm,
never get that right, all of
mm,
these sorts of things. And it's pretty easy to identify these things and find the exceptions. I have people often say to me, "Oh, when I do this, this always happens." Um,
mm,
yeah, I always fail. Like, always? Okay.
mm,
And as you dig in, you'll find instances where they've actually done typically very well, but they're just not focusing on that. So just identifying all those limiting phrases,
mm,
which again, words are important. If you're telling yourself, like you said, if you're telling yourself constantly, "I'm stuck, it's impossible, I never get this right," it'll happen.
mm. It'll be a
Okay.
it'll be a self-fulfilling prophecy after that.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I'll just sort of just flow us into the second point here
Mm,
because it
mm,
flows it flows off it very well. It's to replace that negative internal dialogue with empowering alternatives. So
mm,
getting something wrong, okay, everyone gets something wrong. So I'm
mm,
working on it.
mm,
I'm working on improving this. I'm learning how to. I'm improving this. I'm getting a better understanding of this now. All of these sorts of things are ways to reframe that language.
One of my favorite ones that I got from my mom and dad. Maybe it's a generational thing. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's a cultural thing as well. Being Filipino background and specifically Northern Ilocano background, which is known for being a tight ass, right? That's my father's side. Thanks, Dad. And that is the word no, we can't afford it. All right. It's such a statement that I heard a lot when I was a child.
As
And
did I.
yeah, and it's almost like it became no, I don't deserve it after I can't afford it. Right. And I stopped, literally stopped saying, I don't deserve this. Yes, I'm saying this in this video, but you will not hear me say that in a
Yeah.
normal conversation. The second part of this, the first part of that, which I'm going to go back to, is when I say I can't afford it, I add another word into it, and that is yet. I can't afford it yet.
Yeah. Love it. Love it.
Yeah. So that's a reframe of language there. Yeah. Because, hey, when I was a teenager or in my 20s, there's a lot of things I couldn't afford that I can afford now, right? I wouldn't even blink nowadays for it. But back then, I did, right? Um, and that's why that identifying the limiting phrases and then replacing them with empowering alternatives. Can you give us another one or two power or empowering alternatives, please, Jono?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I'll give a couple of examples,
Yeah,
okay, that I've seen. A couple of sporting examples. Um, Years and years ago, Tiger Woods, when he was at the top of his career, he just had to he made a couple of changes because Tiger Woods being Tiger Woods, he was the best in the world, but he wanted to be better.
that's
And
this.
so to
Okay,
do
I gotta
that,
cut you there. Did you hear that, guys? He's the best, and he still wants to be better. That's why he became the best because it was ongoing. Anyway, go ahead, Jono.
exactly right, exactly right. So his game fell apart for a period. His game
Mm.
fell apart, and he just wasn't hitting the ball all that well.
He wasn't hitting the
But
ball.
someone went up and wasn't hitting it very well.
Mm.
He was just the fraction of a degree off all the time. He was landing 15 feet from the pin instead of 5 feet from the pin, all these sorts of things. So his
Mm.
game just went a little bit off. And one of the reporters walked up to him on the range and just started asking, well, what do you think of your game at the moment? He looked at you having a few problems. And he just goes, I'm just working on a few things.
Mm.
That was it. He could have turned around and said, yeah, I'm really not hitting it very well. I'm really worried about how I'm going to play today. He didn't go there. He just said, yeah, I'm just working on some things. Totally dismissed it. Just got on with his day. Um, the other one, which I thought was great that came to mind. Remember when I'm not a huge NFL fan, but I'll usually watch the Super Bowl, right? Because it's just a big event. The New England Patriots years ago had this run with Brady as quarterback, and they just kept winning the Super Bowl. They were just killing it. And I think it was the last one that they might have won, actually.
Mm.
This is going back probably 6, 7, 8 years, I guess. Anyway, they had a microphone on a couple of the players on the field, right?
They put a microphone on a football
And I think
player.
the
Oh, okay. So what's
yeah, they had it they had it sort of hovering above them and sort of following them around, right?
Yeah, right. Okay.
And they were down like by about 20 points.
Mm.
20 minutes in the game. They were
Yeah.
down by 20. And one of the offensive linemen, whenever Tom Brady would make a mistake and he was making a few, he was going, let it go, Tom. This is going to make a great story. This is going to make a great story. Okay.
Mm.
Never once faltered. They just simply focused on the fact that it was going to be a great story when they made up that 20 odd points and then won. And they did.
I'm so gonna steal that. Hey, this is gonna make this is gonna make a great story. Mm.
Yeah, this is going to make a great story. I was the captain of my cricket team at that time as well, and I actually stole it. I actually
Yeah,
stole it.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I actually stole it the very next Saturday. I stole it.
I will definitely use that. And you said that they kept on going, and to me, that says repetition, right?
And that's exactly it. And that's exactly it. Practicing repetition with intention is the next point here. And that's
Mm,
it. Constantly repeating this reframed positive language to yourself. Really, like you say, words count. You keep repeating that positive language to yourself. So rather than I'm really not good at this, I'm learning how to. I'm
mm,
getting better at. Keep repeating that to yourself, and that keeps you motivated and you keep the positive change ongoing.
mm. And who else is gonna do that for you but yourself, hey?
Exactly right. Exactly right.
Mm. Okay, now let's the fourth one is interrupt negative patterns. So the fourth one is interrupt negative thought patterns.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
So this is really important. I spend a lot of my time in my clinic uh, interrupting people's negative thought patterns. Um, and the reason behind that is one of the things we mentioned last week in our NLP episode as well, is that human behavior is structured and organized. Even negative behaviors, they're
Mm,
structured and they're organized. And if you interrupt the pattern, it tends to reorganize itself in a more beneficial way. Okay, really important thing here. Now, when you're having a really, how that applies here, when you're having a really limiting thought, okay, simply ask yourself, okay, is this limiting thought actually helping me in any way?
mm.
Okay, well, firstly, is it even a valid thought?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, is it actually a valid thought? Okay, and if it is valid, is it actually useful me thinking about this? And this is very close to something that I learned off Gordon Young as well. His name comes up a bit here, right? Um, is it a valid thought? Maybe. If
Mm,
not, let it go. Okay. Is it actually, if it is valid, is it actually useful? Is it something I can actually control?
mm.
Okay. And if it is something you can control, are you going to control it by thinking about it? No. You're going to have to turn it into an action.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's about interrupting these patterns, and the way to do that is to get outside yourself. A lot of these negative thought patterns occur again in the emotional part of your mind. So
Mm.
the idea being to check against actual criteria, check the validity of the thought. I'm no good at this in relation to what? Okay. Simple things like that. Simple
Mm.
things like that.
What am I? Okay, when I did my NLP course, I actually, because I was raised Catholic, so a lot of the stories that I tell myself are Judeo-Christian, right? Am I religious? Probably not anymore, but those stories are still embedded almost in my DNA. Again, I'll say this again online and on camera. The Filipinos has been Catholic since the 1500s, right? That's a long time. So I even inherited cultures, and you can even say maybe my DNA is Catholic
Mm,
because it's been in there for so long. And one of the things that upon reflection, there's an old story, a really old story. So the priests found this adulterous woman, right? This adulterous woman, and took it to the teacher. The teacher and the priest went, "Hey, look at this woman. Is so sinful. Blah 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 blah." Right? And there's a woman there, like shredded, ripped, whatever. And these priests were saying, "The law says that she should be stoned to death." And they were all arguing and all this chaos there. And the teacher knelt down, not on his knees, but sat down or just interrupted everybody by sitting down, right? And started scribbling on the ground, right? Scribbling whatever on the ground. And it was rather distracting because they're trying to stone this woman to death, right? And he was scribbling, and they started what is he writing? What is he writing? Yeah, what is he writing? Right? And the teacher didn't even look up and grab a stone and went, here you go. Whoever has never sinned should throw the stone first. And one by one, the audience just went, oh man, dropped it one by one, and everybody left, right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of parts to take that apart, that nice story, right? The first part is all these priests and bunch of men was hating this woman. They were projecting their sins on her. That's projection, right? They're guilty as if they got some issues within, and now they're gonna project it to a straw man, which is in this case the woman, right? Absolutely helpless. Yeah. And then their anger was so furious that they're willing to murder this woman, right? And what the teacher did is just whatever, sat down and started scribbling. They said scribbling. Some texts say he was writing something. And these chaotic people that is around them, which is perhaps the unconscious mind or a metaphor of, started saying, oh, what does that mean? What's that mean? The focus went from the chaos to the scribble on the ground. And then the teacher said, hey, if you've never sinned, go ahead, do your thing. Right? And for exactly what you just said there, which is the interrupting the thought patterns, reminded me of this story. Because another negative thought pattern is somebody cut you off the road or somebody said something nasty to you, right? And you just, I should have said this, I should have done this, I should have done this, I should have said this. That's now starts to play. And my favorite justification of that one is it's not what he did or it's not what she did. It's the principle of it, which is a critical thinking statement. And
Yeah.
people was like, oh, you have principles? All right, did you write it down? Can you tell me one that got violated by that? Which is what the priests were doing. It's a sin because it violated this.
Mm.
Right? So in our unconscious mind, we have all these rules that don't really exist. Right? Because
It's exactly right. And what's really interesting here as well. So I guess for the people listening, who don't know you as well as I do,
okay.
many years ago, in a galaxy far, far away,
That's it.
Crom was actually training to be a priest at one point. Now, what I think is really interesting about this
Mm.
is I learned some really great stuff from Crom as we do these episodes and as he and I talk, because it seems to me that quite often when we're talking about the conscious mind and the unconscious mind, okay, and these sorts of things, that a lot of the stories that Crom brings up from his previous studies could well be interpreted as the people of the day's attempt to try and explain the difference between conscious and unconscious and trying to get a bit of an understanding of their behavior, which we could go down the rabbit hole with for
Absolutely. Yeah.
that's one of the things that I enjoy about this podcast is that these anecdotes that Crom brings in here, which you bring in here,
mm.
really they're quite on point and they do match exactly what we're doing here. We're coming at it from slightly different angles, but there's a lot of synchronicity in the whole thing.
Absolutely. In case you want to know, I obsessed with Egyptian, um, Roman, Greek, and Judeo-Christian traditions because back then they didn't have therapy, they didn't have NLP, they didn't have anything. In
Yeah,
fact, that only came up in the 1800s, which is what, not 200 years ago?
yeah,
Humanity's history is 10,000 years.
yeah.
We learned how to write 6,000 years only. So there was a big 4,000 year gap. And only at the collapse of the Bronze Age did we really become, how should we say it, civilized, as in most human beings, right? Yes, there were civilizations, but most of them during the Bronze Age were still hunters and gatherers. Why am I bringing it here? Because those people did exactly what we were doing here now, but they didn't have a term for mindset, right? The mind is part of the spirit, right? And we actually have the technology. When I say technology, we have a technical or a study of a technical process that we can use, such as breaking it down. I mean, reframing your language, that's that's very modern, right? But people actually in the past said, hey, don't say it that way, which is another way of saying reframe your language, right? So yeah, I love it. The fifth part of this is very important because I think it's a new generational thing. Why am I saying that? Because the fifth part of this is celebrate small wins. I'm Gen X and John is Gen X, right? I think it started with us in our generation and permeated its way to the millennials and also the Gen Zs that is around us now. That is celebrate small wins. When I was a child, I got this a lot. Don't celebrate it yet because it's not finished. We
Mm,
actually got stopped. Another one is don't count the chicks before they hatch. Yes, there's wisdom in that one,
yeah.
wisdom in that one, but it's not the rule. It's not do not, right? Yes, I get why they say that, so you don't disappoint yourself. But what do you think of celebrating small wins, Jano, about that?
Oh, it's celebrating the small wins is essential, and that's something that I'm constantly talking about with my clients. It's a matter of it's a simply a matter of reframing your focus. You can focus on what went wrong, or you can celebrate all the small wins. And as you go through that process of celebrating the small wins, it simply reinforces the habit, okay, and builds confidence. So as you go about using this improved internal dialogue, you celebrate every time you do it. Like, good job, me. I just did it again. I just did it again. Builds confidence and it really allows it to stick and allows you to move forward. Pretty simple.
Nice. And that's reframing your language. So acknowledging the moments when you are successfully doing this.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. When you say, I can't afford it, say yet. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then when you did it, say, hey, oh my God, I did it. And then do
Yeah.
it again and be aware of it. Oh, I did it again. I did it again. Right. But obviously, you don't have to vocalize it. But, one of my anchors, this is one of my anchors. And I learned this in NLP 12 years ago in 2012, is when I literally do this. You know that saying, pat yourself in the back? I literally do that. Right. Because for far too long, every time somebody pats me in the back is I'm sad because, oh, it's all right, they're there. That kind of thing. So I reframe that and go, okay, my right hand going to my left. That means good job. And eventually the there, you're sad, oh, poor you, disappeared and got replaced by patting myself in the back and that one. So you celebrate it. Okay. The third idea on this, um, the third idea about the start again. The third idea on the mindset reset is breaking down the limiting beliefs. Oh, this is not easy, but it's very possible and necessary.
That's
So
absolutely right. And we've got the 5 points of breaking down limiting beliefs here. And they really do flow into each other extremely well. And the first one's very simple. Okay, to run this particular exercise with yourself, firstly, just identify a limiting belief. It might be something like, I'm not smart enough, I'm not good enough, I always fail. One of these sorts of things. Okay. Firstly, simple step, identify the limiting belief. Simple as that.
Mm.
Okay. Identify it and write it down, just as we did previously. Actually, write it down. Okay. And it flows on very easily into step two here, which we touched on a little earlier, but finding evidence that contradicts that belief. Typically, limiting
Nice.
beliefs.
Yeah.
Exactly. Typically, limiting beliefs come from the emotional part of your mind.
Mm.
Okay. The problem with doing your thinking and generating beliefs there is that there's no filter in the
Mm.
emotional part of your mind. It's trigger to reaction. It's have a thought, give a thought airtime, assume it's true. Okay. So the idea again of identifying that limiting belief, writing it down, and in so doing, engaging the logical part of your mind, and then look for the evidence that contradicts it. Okay. So write down the times when you succeeded, when you've shown strength, when you've actually done better at something that you thought you were going to do. And it can be the simplest of things. It doesn't have to be anything enormous. It can simply be, oh wow, I cleaned my room really
Mm.
well. Okay. Didn't think I'd ever get that clean. Okay. It can be the most simple of things. Okay. It's all about the small things and taking note of them. And people make there's evidence that contradicts people's limiting beliefs occurring all the time in people's lives. But because of their map that we've discussed a few times, they simply don't take notice of it.
Mm. It's a very good point on that one, identifying limiting beliefs. When when people say, or there's a known fact that children learn very fast, right?
Yeah.
They learn very fast, or they're quicker in learning than adults, right? If you actually look at the evidence, adults are more intelligent than kids. And so if adults are more intelligent than kids, how come kids learn faster? Right? So it's this. When you ask a kid, hey guys, we're playing a new game. Yeah, all right, let's go. All right. If you tell an adult, hey guys, we're gonna do this game. You will hear this with many people. Nah, I'm not good at that. Right? No, I'm not good at that. They won't even give it a go, right? Because they have some information in their head or negative emotions to support why they're not good at that. But guess what? Kids don't have. They don't have that baggage of memories and negative emotions that says, I'm not good at that, right? And guess
Exactly.
what? That's why they will jump in it, and will go, boom, I will do that. And to me, that's almost that bliss of, yep, I'll give that a go. It's almost, for the lack of a better word, heavenly, right? Because if, like, seriously, think about it. It's there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong within when you're that blissed out. Anyway, why am I telling you this? Is because limiting beliefs leads to limiting behaviors. And limiting behaviors now is it's no longer just inside you. It's now affecting your behavior. And the next part of that one is now your limited results, right? Now, if you want to get better in life, on anything, right? The first part is remove the limit that you have set for the results you want. And I love this because I'm a marketer and I've done a lot of sales, and it's the growth marketing thing. We're perpetually going, all right, we need to grow this by 3%. All right, we're going to grow this by 10%. Sometimes the client or the boss will go, we need to grow that by 10%. And I will ask the questions, are we going to add more resources in it? Like money, budget, and stuff like that. And the and the boss or the client will go, no, there's no more budget or resources to be added onto it. So the first thing we need to do is remove the obstacles that is slowing us down to hitting that number. So we're increasing the profitability, right? So I know I'm getting technical here, guys, but your results that is limited now, if you remove the hurdles that will limit you to get those results, number one, you have a better chance. You actually have a pathway to doing so. Now, remove the behaviors that slowed you down or previously got in the way, such as doing it in the last minute, right? Or a process of approvals in business, right? That slowed you down. And instead of 14 days running the campaign, you only had 5 days to run the campaign or an idea. And then within now is the limiting belief that created the behavior and the limited results. Remove that limiting belief.
In that sense, almost in the example you were using there, it's almost like just because we've done it this way doesn't mean we have to keep doing it this way.
Yes, that's right.
One of the most dangerous things that you hear, to go on from that example, one of those dangerous things you hear in business is, well, yeah, we've always done it that way.
Yeah,
Okay, limiting belief.
that is a limiting belief. And it permeates, hey.
Yeah, it does.
It permeates when everybody starts believing and behaving like it.
Yeah,
Now, now that limiting belief not only manifested in one person's action, it now manifested into a group of people, like it just spread like a virus.
yeah.
So just get rid of it. Seriously, just get
Yeah.
rid of it. That's
Simple
how
as
you do it.
that. Making these changes, that's why it's a really good point. Making these changes is a lot simpler than people give it credit.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just simply a matter of knowing what you're doing.
Yeah. My missus, I love using my missus because she believes that she can't decide. And I'm the complete opposite. I just
So
decide.
she's decided that she
Yeah.
can't
Yeah. That's
decide.
that's gold. And I say to her, like, baby, like, by the way, she is far more advanced in many ways in life than me, right? So, but one of the things that I'm far more advanced than her is decision making, right? I think because of the fear of making a mistake, right? And it takes one of her limiting beliefs is it took me, 10 days to decide on that. And I say, baby, no, it didn't take you 10 days. It took you 10 days to gather information and all the options. And your decision was instant. Because when you decided, you decided. That's it. It was that quick, right? And letting go of limiting beliefs can be as quick as that. From now on, you go, no, I don't believe in that anymore.
It absolutely can be, and and again, I guess where we're at there, what it involves is we went through the finding the evidence that contradicts the limiting belief, then reframe that belief. Okay, and
Mm,
that's the simple switch. Okay, that you're just referring to. That's the reframing of that belief, rather than I always fail. It's oh, I learn from my mistakes.
mm,
I can't do that. I can't do that yet. Or to use your example, I can't afford that. I can't afford that yet.
yeah,
Okay. That's as simple as that. That's as simple as reframing the belief has to be.
yeah, yeah. So that's now the next part of this one is a bit tricky because if you haven't done NLP, let's try it anyway, just briefly. It's just to give you an intro. Maybe in another video we will talk about it in a deeper level. What is timeline therapy?
Well, in the context that we're talking about here, so timeline therapy itself is a technique in NLP,
Hmm.
which we could go way down a very deep rabbit hole with that right now. We don't want to get too deep down that particular rabbit hole, but what we're going to, the way we're going to explain it in this particular context is it's very much revisiting the origin of a belief.
Mm.
Okay, as simple as that. When you're talking about changing, changing mindset, changing a belief, in the context we're talking now, although timeline therapy itself is, like I say, a much bigger conversation, but for the context now, it's simply about revisiting the origin of that belief, um, to lessen its emotional impact on you and be able to change it. So to simply understanding, okay, when did I come up with this belief?
Yeah.
Um, it's one of those things, when I was, if I think back when I was 10, I didn't have this belief. So when did I come up with this belief? Okay, it's as
Mm.
simple as that. Looking back at what point you actually developed this belief, how you actually came up with that belief, what the situation was there. Now, what can happen, you can look at back when you developed that belief, and it may be many years ago, and the situation you were in then is completely different to the situation you're in now in life. And so the belief is no longer relevant, but nonetheless, you kept it anyway.
Mm.
Okay. So essentially, for the context of what we're talking about here, that's essentially what the timeline therapy side of it refers to. Simply going back to the origin of a belief, looking at the context of your life back then, comparing it to the context of your life that you're at now, and working out that, well, hang on, this limiting belief doesn't actually belong in my life anymore. At which point you can clean the rest of your timeline up and let it go.
Yeah. A good example of this one was an ad that I saw on TV. And if you live in Australia, you probably know this ad because it was in TV. And it was a public safety, not public safety, it's a public health ad where there was an overweight guy, right? And he said, "No, I need to finish my food on my plate," right? And he's pretty big, and he always finish what's on his plate. You want a clean plate, right? And I think the ad said, "All right, when did that happen?" And then he went back. It's a good ad. So it went back into memory, and then he realized it was his mum who said, "Have a clean, finish your food on a clean plate and have a clean plate. Otherwise, you can't go outside and play."
Mm.
Right? So there was a penalty for not finishing your food, which is, you know, it's still I still say that to my kids. But unlike the past and now, well, in the past we didn't have nutrition, right? We didn't have nutrition. Come on, guys. We
Yeah.
we didn't. We we had for breakfast sugar, and it was allowed. It was okay, and a glass of Coke, right? But we're that was nutrition, right? A spaghetti from Jollibee is nutritious because back then part of the five main food groups is carbs. There's no talk about the quality of the carb. There's no talk about the quality of the meat. It was meat, carbs, and a bit of vegetables. It got inverted now. It's more vegetables and less carbs and less protein, right? So back then,
Mm.
my mom never really thought about, you know, the food. All she thought about is, I work my ass off to put food on your table. You better finish that, right?
Mm.
And if you want to play outside, you need to finish that. But this is the thing. She's a Filipino mom. So my plate is a mountain of food, right? So in this ad, it was very similar. It was a mountain of food. And this is the thing. He will have seconds. And he's already full after the maybe 1.1 or 1.2 of the second plate.
Mm.
But it was still there. You need to finish your food. And the end of the ad, by the way, this isn't only a 15, 30-second ad, like the new him, right? He just, I'm full, and he pushed the plate out.
Yeah.
right? And that is exactly what this kind of timeline therapy that we were talking about, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's interesting you brought that up as an example. The amount of people that I deal with who are trying to reframe their relationship with food, okay,
Mm,
and just be healthier, and how often it comes up that they were raised to finish everything on their plate.
yeah.
And so they know they're eating too much, but they've just got it absolutely ingrained in them to finish everything on their plate. Now, that is an outdated limiting belief that you
Yeah.
can go use timeline therapy to go back, spot the origin of, and clear out. So that's a classic example. So,
Yeah. You and guys, you don't have to finish your food, especially on your third plate.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. The last part of this for this video is anchoring the new belief. How do you do that, Jono?
I spend an enormous amount of time. Every client I have, I do anchoring work with. Okay.
Mm,
And anchoring is a it's a really powerful thing. And let me explain just how anchoring essentially works. Okay.
mm,
You know, when you hear a song on the radio and it takes you back somewhere. And in that moment when you hear it, you're back in a memory from years ago, like, and you get this rush of emotion like you're there. That is an auditory anchor. Okay,
mm.
it's a sound anchors you to a very specific memory and the emotion attached. Now, same thing when you walk into a room and you smell something, you're like, oh, that reminds me of such and such, and it's a really
Mm.
powerful rush in emotion. That's an olfactory anchor. So what I like to do is pair a new belief or a resource state that you build in someone.
What's resource
Okay.
state again?
Pair it. A resource state is something that you typically achieve through a visual technique with people. Um, Essentially, what you would do, and this is a good way to explain how anchoring works, actually, is get someone to envisage themselves in the state they want to be in.
Yeah. Okay. So that's
Okay.
the resource state.
Yeah. So the resource state is the state that you want to achieve, totally unencumbered by these limiting beliefs or limiting internal narrative, all that sort of thing. So it's the state that you want to achieve. It's your arrival point when you've achieved positive change.
Mm.
Okay. And I get to picture themselves in that positive state, in that resource state. And as they do it and they engage in the visual and the emotion of being in this positive resource state, to do some kind of a physical gesture as they do it, whether it be to hold two fingers together, something like that, whether it be to grab themselves on the earlobe, whatever it happens to be, some sort of small physical gesture that anchors them to their resource state. Now, the anchor I typically use is get people to put their thumb on the second knuckle of their middle finger, like so, which if you're hearing the audio version, you can't see. But I'm just putting my thumb on the inside of my middle finger on the
Hmm.
second knuckle down. The reason for that is they never come into contact like that, so it's unique. Okay.
Mm.
And it's also no one else sees it. So you don't look strange when you're engaging in it.
True.
Um, and so you can anchor yourself in a very real way with a physical gesture. So once you create that resource state for yourself, you can use
Mm.
a physical gesture which will anchor you to it, and your brain will pick up very quickly what's going on and what the purpose of that physical gesture is. And so
Mm.
as you engage that physical gesture, once you've done it enough times, once you've run an exercise to get there enough times, you engage that physical gesture and it immediately takes you mentally back to your resource state.
That's
Okay.
brilliant. I
Very
love that
simple,
technique. Yeah.
very simple, very powerful.
Yeah. By the way, the anchoring can also, I already mentioned it in this video. Anchoring can also be a bad thing, well, a negative thing. For example, when someone's sad and they pat you in the back saying, there, every time they do that, they're anchoring that in your back, right? So that's the what not to do. Yeah. The other one is when a person gets sympathy. Nothing wrong with sympathy, by the way. But the only way they can get attention from the loved one or friends or people is by being a victim or being sad, or and so people will pity them, right, and using sympathy, right? So they're anchoring getting love, attention to something horrible, which is an emotion of feeling sad. I'll give an example where this is horrible now, right? When you walk down the street and you see people begging, right? There is one in Sydney, especially in around the Ultimo area. People are in begging mode, right? And they have the saddest face, right? And they're there in bowing in a beggar's mode, hand on a can, both hands, and they have this facial expression of absolute grief and sadness. And every time somebody drops a coin, there's now a sound of they just earned money, right?
Mm.
So now imagine what's that doing to that human being begging, right? I wonder if they ever go to a pub, maybe in the old days, and they won a poker machine and all these coins go starts falling in the poker machine. I wonder if that triggers that emotion, which is a horrible way to. So I do wonder what is that? What if that example? What is that doing to those people that are begging in the streets? And I do wonder. And I went through this process, you know, with myself. Like what postures and angles that is making me feel sad because I've anchored all these negative emotions on it so badly on it. So that's the new. By the way, new belief doesn't necessarily is good, right? And if you catch yourself with a new belief and you anchored it somewhere, catch yourself, like I said, capture it and let go of it, right?
Yeah.
One of my favorite um, stories from the ancient world. Here we go again. Anyway, one of my favorite stories in the ancient world is in the Egyptian times, right? So this is before Christianity. This is before Moses, right? So it's that old, right? Is when a person passes away or they die, they go through, they get picked up by Anubis, right? And also taken to the underworld, right? Where the heaven in the underworld is ruled by Osiris, right? And then there is now a place also in the underworld where you stop, or the human being or the soul stops existing, just gone. Not even hell, just gone, right? And this used to frighten the Egyptians, right? So what they do, what happens to the dead or the soul is they travel to this underworld, and the judge is the Jehuti, or also known as Thoth, you know, the Egyptian god that looks like an ibis. And in front of him is there's a measuring, like a scale. And what happens is in one part of the scale is a feather, and the other one is your heart of the soul. And if the heart is heavier than the feather, that person goes to oblivion, gone. And if the feather is lighter than the heart or heavier than the heart, which means the heart is lighter than the feather, they go to the kingdom of Osiris, which
Mm.
which actually where we got the saying lighthearted, right? Now,
Ah, of course.
yeah, that's why it's lighthearted, right? Now, that is so profound. That story is so profound because if your heart is heavy with all these beliefs, with all this guilt and shames, with all this anger, it just bogs you down, right? That's what's that story is saying. It's keeping you away from that paradise, right? So what do? Lighten yourself up. Get rid of
Yeah.
these
And that's,
limiting beliefs. Just lighten yourself up. I know that's such a thing to say. It's like, when you're someone sad, go, cheer up. No, that's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm
yeah.
saying here. When I say it's lighten up, as in let go of a lot of things, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And that is resetting your mindset.
That's it. Just
That is,
reset. I know
that's,
there's a minimization. We should avoid saying just. Yeah, I'll say it again. I'll say it again. And that's it. That's what resetting your mindset means, right? Another idea that came from the Egyptians, okay, is reality. This is the ancient world, by the way. This is the ancient world. This is like 6,000 years ago. That's insanely that old, right? Is the the reality or the world is so it doesn't just split apart and goes to space, right? I don't, by the way, I don't know how they knew that we were an orb and there's space, and that's why it needs to be put together. I don't know how they know that. No one knows how they know that. You know what they call it? That thing that puts it together? They call it the netter or the net. They literally call it that, right?
interesting.
Yeah, that's the netter, right? And why am I telling you this? Because that net, yeah, is also within each person to control the body, to, to keep it together. It's also within the soul and the psyche, the mind, the spirit, is to keep it together. And that reminds me of what is a mindset. So your mind doesn't just falls everywhere and it's not chaotic, it's in an orderly way. And by the way, there's a Chinese saying, or maybe it's Russian, I can't remember now. I think it's probably Chinese, or I can't remember. There you go. It's either Chinese or Russian, so please don't quote me on this one. Money loves order, right? So if you have an orderly mindset, if you have an orderly way of thinking, right? And you're not bogged down by these limiting beliefs, wow, the first thing you can check now is your bank account. It's probably big.
That's exactly right. And it's the most successful people in the world, whether it be in business or sport or just, being successful personally, are the people that have addressed their mindset and regularly go back and do things like we've been speaking about today,
Yeah,
run through these techniques and exercise and reset their mindset.
yeah,
And that's the basis, it's very much the basis of what we've been talking about today.
that's it. That's it. And here you go. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you. And I think we can wrap up from here. Next week, we'll be back again with another video. And what we're going to be doing, Jono and I will be doing is we'll go through ways to reset your mindset. We'll put together something that you can take home. We will explain the principles, how to do it. And maybe one day we're probably going to be returning and we'll probably start releasing a product that you can get and you can just listen to or work with that can actually help you out with resetting your mindset and not just theory. We can actually give you something that will actually help you out that you can do at home or in the office or wherever you can.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's all about providing, the approach here is to provide easily used practical techniques, simple
Yeah,
practical techniques that are very repeatable, that we're looking to provide in a structure. And I guess what we've been through today is step one in putting that. We'll be back next week with a few more points and a few more exercises that you can use to continue on this journey.
Yep, that's it. Once again, guys, thank you very much for joining us in this video. My name is Crom.
And my name's Jono.
Thank you for visiting us. And please, if you haven't subscribed yet, please do so. Click on that notification button so you can be with us when we release our next videos. And until now, I'll speak to you soon. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for coming, everyone.